The referendum on Scottish independence will take place on Thursday the 18th of September 2014, when Scottish voters will be asked, should Scotland be an independent country? Since the Scottish Government announced its intention to hold a referendum, we've been looking at the key legal and constitutional issues that will arise if there is a yes vote. Important issues include Scotland's future membership of the European Union, the currency for any future independent Scotland, and territorial boundaries. And Charles is going to begin by looking at the EU issues.
So Scottish membership of the EU has been one of the most hotly contested issues since the independence debate really began last year. The Scottish Government's position now is that Scotland would have to negotiate both the fact of membership and the terms on which membership would take place. Some of the criticisms made of the Scottish Government is that their timetable for transitioning to independence is too ambitious to allow those negotiations to conclude from a yes vote in September 2014 to independence in March 2016. Certainly previous applicants to the European Union have taken much longer than that to secure membership, but Scotland is compliant with EU law and has many of the institutions in place already that EU requires. If we want to talk about the terms on which Scottish membership might take place, we can look at this diagram. This diagram shows the membership of the various international European institutions. The EU is obviously this blue circle in the middle. Let's take a look at where the UK stands within that. So the UK is within the EU, but it's outside the Eurozone, and it's also outside the Schengen area. The Schengen area is the area in which people can move between countries without having to cross passport controls. So if Scotland is negotiating membership, it starts outside in the dark blue and looks to repeat most UK opt-outs to end up here next to the Union flag. Those opt-outs are not just from the Eurozone and from Schengen, but include the UK's budget rebate and some policy areas. Now, to join the EU, Scotland would need the consent of all the existing member states. Each and every one of those states would have a veto over Scottish membership and over the terms of that membership. New entrants to the EU are generally obliged to accept all of the pre-existing EU treaty obligations. So would it be likely that Scotland could get any opt-outs? An opt-out from Schengen should not be too difficult. There wouldn't be a particularly significant benefit to the other members of the zone to be able to move to Scotland without showing a passport. But there would be significant disruption within the British Isles because the UK and Ireland already have their own common travel area. Effectively, membership of Schengen would require re-establishing a border between Scotland and England. The euro is a little bit more complicated, however. Of the non-Eurozone states within the EU, only the UK and Denmark have treaty opt-outs from joining the euro. All the other countries have an obligation to do so. However, that's not quite as clear-cut as it might sound. Sweden has managed to stay out of the euro by deliberately avoiding the criteria for euro membership, which include holding exchange rates within a particular valuation of the euro for 2 years. The Scottish Government says that that example means that euro membership is not mandatory even if there is a treaty obligation. But the EU and other member states are now wise to the Swedish example, so might Scotland be given stricter obligations without the same wiggle room? But leaving questions of the euro aside, Scotland could, if it wanted, have its own currency, as many other independent countries do. It would have its own central bank and its own monetary policy. But the Scottish Government's proposal at the moment is to have a sterling zone with the rest of the United Kingdom. What that would entail is the Bank of England remaining the lender of last resort and the setter of interest rates for Scotland, but having Scottish membership on its committees and taking the needs of the Scottish economy into account when setting interest rates and deciding on the money supply. Now, part of that proposal is that there would be agreements on debt and borrowing limits set between the Scottish and UK governments to try and avoid some of the problems that the euro has had. This proposal is not something the Scottish Government could insist on. It would depend on agreement with the rest of the United Kingdom, and the UK Government has said that it will not negotiate on these sorts of issues in advance of the referendum. It may therefore be an issue where we go into the referendum without having definitive answers. Another issue that might require negotiation is a division of UK territory, and in particular the North Sea, and Christine is going to discuss that.
So far as territory is concerned, the land boundary with England is perfectly well settled. Bigger questions have been asked about how one divides up the territorial sea between Scotland and the rest of the United Kingdom, an important question given the location of oil and gas reserves in the North Sea. So where would the line be drawn? It's a well understood principle of international law that territorial waters are divided according to a median principle. In plain English, you draw a line from the midpoint between the coasts of the countries concerned. That principle can be seen in action on this map showing territorial waters in Europe, and can be particularly well seen looking at the dividing line between the United Kingdom and France in the English Channel and between the United Kingdom and Norway in the North Sea. What's less well known is that territorial waters can also be adjusted by agreement and negotiation. That's most obvious in Europe in relation to Germany's territorial waters, which are shown in black on the map and which don't follow the usual principle. Giving Germany a greater area of territorial sea than its coastline would justify followed an international court case and negotiations between Germany and other European nations. Coming back to Scotland and the rest of the United Kingdom, the median principle would see east coast seas divided along this line. There has, though, been discussion in the past about division being created further south along this line, a line which is used already within the United Kingdom to divide Scotland and England for the purposes of court actions. Ultimately, the precise boundary may be just one of the many issues forming the basis of negotiations after a yes vote. We'll be continuing to talk to clients up to and after the referendum. We'll be monitoring the debate to see how it develops, and we'll be advising on issues of interest and of concern.